Let them throw stones. Diamonds are formed under pressure, not in peace. They thought you were glass, fragile, easy to crack, but they didn't realize you were forged like obsidian, dark, sharp, unbreakable. They smiled in your face while sharpening their knives, thinking you wouldn't feel the sting. But now the knives have turned to dust in their hands, and you haven't even flinched. You didn't just survive the fire. They didn't know you were the fire. If this message speaks to something deep inside you, like it's been sitting in your bones this whole time, then don't just scroll past. Like and subscribe. When you do, you're helping this message reach more of the chosen. You're letting the algorithm know that this energy, this truth, needs to be heard. You're sending a signal straight to the ones who forgot who they are, and shaking up the ones who hoped they'd never remember. Let's begin. They've been operating under a dangerous illusion. For too long, people have looked at you and seen something soft, someone too nice to fight back, too calm to mean business, too quiet to be dangerous. They saw your heart and thought it made you weak. They saw your silence and assumed it meant surrender. But they were never fighting just you. They were clashing with the force of the universe itself. And now, the universe is collecting its debt. You are not average. You were never meant to blend in. You've been set apart, not for comfort, not for applause, but for purpose. The kind of purpose that keeps certain people up at night. Because when a chosen one wakes up to their truth, the entire system built on their silence starts to crumble. You weren't just chosen for blessings, you were chosen for battle. That's why it's been heavy. That's why the attacks came disguised as friends, family, lovers, co-workers. That's why you were isolated, doubted, pushed to the edge. Because your light is not ordinary. Your presence is not harmless. You walk in rooms and shift the atmosphere without saying a word. That's not energy. That's power. That's the universe moving through you like a storm no one saw coming. And yet, you forgot. You looked around during the worst of it and started to question your worth. You saw people turning on you, mocking your pain. And you started to wonder if maybe you were the problem. You questioned your light, tried to dim it, shrink it, make it small enough to fit in places it was never meant to be. But here's the truth. They saw your light long before you did, and it terrified them. That's why they tried to dim it before you could even name it. You were never alone. Every time they threw dirt on your name, the universe used it to plant something stronger. Every closed door was protection. Every betrayal was a clearing. Every silence was sacred space, being made for the real you to rise. And now that you're rising, they're panicking. See, the power of being chosen doesn't just bless you. It haunts the ones who tried to destroy you, because they realize too late, you're not just here to survive. You're here to shake the ground they built their false sense of control on. You're here to reclaim what was always yours. And the scariest part, there's nothing they can do to stop it now. This isn't your final form. This is just your reminder. And trust, when the chosen remember who they are, the world remembers who it belongs to. Before we go any deeper, if you feel that fire rising in your chest, if something in you is waking up and saying, "This was meant for me," then drop the number 77 in the comments. That's the signal. That's how we find each other. That's how you let the universe know you heard the call. And when you like and subscribe, you're not just supporting a message. You're sending a shockwave through the system that tried to bury you. You're making sure this reaches another chosen one who's still second-guessing their power. All right, now that the real ones are locked in, let's get into it. Number 1. The quiet one turned out to be the storm. They thought you were background noise. Turns out you were the warning siren before the collapse. Let them eat their assumptions. Let them sip on their arrogance like poison disguised as wine. Because now the truth has hit them like cold steel. You're not soft, you're not sweet, and you damn sure aren't safe to underestimate. For years, they poked the bear, thinking it was a kitten. For years, they danced around your silence, misreading your calm as surrender. And now they're stumbling, wide-eyed and rattled, as the storm they mocked starts to tear through everything they thought they controlled. You didn't change, you revealed. You see, the power of being chosen is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights and applause. It watches, it waits. It walks softly until the ground is ready to shake. The universe chooses in silence. And when it does, reality bends. Doors close for others and open for you. Rules break. Paths shift. What should have crushed you clears out of your way instead. That's not luck. That's the alignment. That's what happens when you were chosen before anyone even knew there was a battle coming. They didn't just test you, they tested the system behind you, and they lost badly. People don't like to talk about what happens when they mess with a chosen one. They pretend it was just a misunderstanding, just life happening. No, they tried to block your purpose. They tried to dim your frequency. They played with fire thinking it was just candlelight. But when you mess with someone, the universe is backing. You're not fighting one person. You're challenging a cosmic contract. You're going up against timing, destiny, and protection that's built like armor around someone who wasn't sent here to fit in, but to shift everything. The truth is, they weren't prepared for the consequence. You were quiet too long. You gave them too much room. And in that space, they convinced themselves you were weak. They thought kindness was a gap in your armor. That silence was a flaw in your strategy. But the chosen aren't loud for a reason. They're too busy becoming the threat. Let them absorb that lesson. Let it echo. And if you're sitting here wondering, why did I let them treat me like that for so long? Let me stop you right there. That humility wasn't a weakness. It was a setup. The universe needed them to show their hand, to reveal their true colors, to build the receipts in silence. You were hidden in plain sight. You were the test, and they failed. This was never about you being soft. This was about them being blind. And yet, here's where you almost lost yourself. You started to believe their lie. You felt the isolation and mistook it for abandonment. You looked around, wondering why no one was standing beside you, and began questioning if you were even meant for this path. But chosen ones walk alone because they carry something too heavy for the average soul. The silence was sacred. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Because when the universe aligns with you, it clears out what can't go where you're going, no matter how tightly you tried to hold on. You were never losing. You were being leveled up in disguise. Stop doubting your strength just because it didn't look like rage. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves through stillness. Sometimes it hides in patience. Sometimes it shows up at the exact moment when your enemies think they've won and flips the whole game in your favor. Now they're shook, not because you're loud now, but because you're awake. They don't know what to do with you anymore. The one who used to shrink themselves to make others comfortable is now walking like the universe owes them space. And it does. The one who used to stay quiet to avoid conflict now speaks like truth itself is backing their voice. The one who used to ask for permission now takes up space like they were born to own it. Because you were. And don't forget, the pressure was part of it. Every ounce of pain, betrayal, mockery, it all had purpose. Diamonds are made under pressure, yes, but don't forget, so are weapons, so are warriors. And you? You're not just surviving anymore. You're cutting through illusions with every step you take. Let them whisper, let them stare, let them backtrack and pretend they didn't throw dirt on your name. The same ones who laughed at your silence are now praying you stay quiet. But it's too late for that. They triggered something they can't put back in the box. So this is your reminder. You were never meant to fit. You were meant to shift. Stop asking why you were left out and start owning the fact that you were set apart. Chosen ones don't blend in, they break the mold. You weren't made to be liked. You were built to lead through fire. And if you're feeling that energy in your chest right now, if your heart's pounding like it knows something's about to snap into place, don't brush that off. That's the universe saying, finally, you see it now. You're not sweet, you're not soft, you're sacred, sharp, and strategic. And they're finally realizing it. Too late. Number 2. They pulled the curtain. Now they can't unsee what's coming. Some truths don't whisper. They rip through the air like lightning, leaving everything exposed, especially the ones who thought they'd never be seen. The mask is off. The veil they thought would hide your power forever. Gone, and not delicately lifted like in some gentle revelation. No, ripped away, violently, by the force of something so ancient it doesn't ask for permission. The moment came, like a thunderclap. You know the one. That quiet second when everything inside you snapped back into place. Not the broken version of you, but the real you. The one buried under years of conditioning, silence, doubt, and survival mode. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with fireworks, but it was unmistakable. The shift in your energy, the stillness in your eyes, the drop in your tone like truth had finally decided to speak through your mouth. The air itself changed around you. You didn't have to say much. They felt it. That raw pressure, that unshakable presence, that invisible weight of someone who's no longer playing the game. And for the first time, they were scared. Let them be. Because what they witnessed wasn't rage. It wasn't rebellion. It was remembrance. The universe didn't carve your path through fire and shadow just so you could dim your glow for people still trapped in illusions. You weren't put through storms just to return and act like sunshine. No, you became the storm. You are the shift they can't stop. And now that they've seen it, there's no going back. That nice, compliant version of you, gone. That version they could manipulate, guilt-trip, gaslight and overlook, buried beneath the bones of everything they thought they broke. You were never broken, just buried. And now the earth around you has cracked open. They thought they were playing with someone soft, someone they could mold, silence, or use. But what they were really poking was a soul backed by the full weight of the universe's intention. Every time they lied on your name, every time they smiled while secretly praying for your downfall, they were placing bets against the universe. And now, the house is collecting. See, they thought they were tearing you down, but they weren't fighting you. They were resisting the correction of a system much bigger than them, one that doesn't forget, one that lets them get real comfortable before pulling the plug. Now that the veil's gone, they're scrambling. They don't know how to speak to this version of you, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who doesn't chase or explain or shrink to fit into cages made of expectations. You walk into rooms now and everything feels different. That's not ego. That's what happens when divine alignment hits the surface. But let's be real. You almost didn't make it here. You doubted. You wept. You begged for answers that never came fast enough. You mistook isolation for abandonment, the delay for denial, the silence for rejection. You even looked in the mirror some days and wondered if you really were the problem. That's how deep the programming ran. That's how hard they tried to convince you your wings were just scars. But now look, you're not just remembering who you are, you're embodying it. And every time you do, it shakes the foundation of people who thought they had power over you. Their control only worked when you were asleep. Their influence only mattered when you believed they had any. But now you see clearly. The veil is gone, and nothing about you is invisible anymore. So let them panic. Let them feel the heat of the light they tried to smother. That light isn't just yours. It's a signal to others like you, a warning to the ones who came for you, a flare for the ones still hiding. Because here's the truth. When the chosen rise, everything hiding behind fake power and false light starts to crumble. You weren't made to be safe. You were made to be seen. And now that they've seen you, the illusion has shattered. It's too late to unsee the truth. Too late to stop what's already been set in motion. They ripped the curtain, and now the storm is walking upright, with your name written in its wind. Number 3. You let them sleep on you. Now they wake to a nightmare. They mistook your silence for surrender, your softness for submission, but they weren't watching a weakness. They were witnessing a setup. Let them sit in the ruins of their own assumptions. Because what they called sweet was actually surveillance. What they labeled harmless was actually high-level strategy. You didn't dim your light to survive. You cloaked it to study. Every warrior knows the value of being underestimated. And you played the role better than they'll ever admit. You moved quietly, too quietly for them to ever feel threatened. They thought you were simple, safe, soft, non-lethal. And oh, how they loved that version of you, the one who didn't challenge their delusions, the one who smiled while they whispered, the one who never raised their voice even when surrounded by knives. That version made them feel powerful, untouchable, in control. But here's what they didn't know. While they were laughing, you were learning. Every conversation was a clue. Every fake smile was a fingerprint. Every shady move they thought went unnoticed was documented, time-stamped, and filed in your mental archives. You didn't react, not because you were weak, but because you were too focused on the bigger picture. They were trying to win battles. You were preparing to end the war. See, people like them can't recognize real power unless it's loud, angry, or loud about being angry. They expect strength to be flashy, aggressive, public. But you moved like a shadow with purpose, unbothered, undetected, until now. Now, the time for strategy is over. The mask has been dropped, and what's left in your place is something they never trained for, because they weren't prepared for your emergence. They only rehearsed for your compliance. They failed the test you were. This wasn't deception. Don't let them rewrite the narrative. This was survival. This was divine planning. This was universal positioning at its finest. The universe hid you in plain sight, not to protect you from them, but to protect them from the consequences of waking you up too soon. You were always aware, always watching, always 10 steps ahead, but you let them move, let them talk, let them expose themselves without ever lifting a finger. That wasn't silence. That was power-collecting interest. And now that you've stepped into your full self, now that the light is turned all the way up, they're fumbling, backtracking, rewriting history to soften their guilt. But it's too late. The strategy has served its purpose, and the warrior is no longer hiding in soft tones and safe eyes. You're walking in clarity now, fully aligned, and fully aware of who you are and what you carry. That scares them more than anything, because now they know they didn't just cross someone kind, they crossed someone chosen. They went to war with someone whose armor was forged in universal fire, someone who was never really alone, never really unarmed, never really as sweet as they pretended to believe. And chosen ones, we don't beg for payback. We let karma call collect. This is your reminder. You never needed to shout to make impact. You never had to prove anything to people operating on borrowed power. You moved how you moved because the mission demanded patience. The rise required restraint. The comeback needed silence. Until now. Now you speak and things shift. Now you move and walls fall. Now you show up and people remember what real presence feels like. They remember what truth tastes like when it finally stops hiding behind politeness. They're shook because they watched you for years and still saw nothing coming. That's not their miscalculation. It's your mastery. They had the chance to act right when you were in your quiet phase. They could have respected you before the storm, but now the storm is you, and it doesn't ask for apologies. So let them stutter, let them scramble, let them try to make peace with a power they spent years disrespecting. Because now they know that mask wasn't weakness, that silence wasn't fear, that softness just cover. The hidden strategy is complete. Now it's time to collect. Number 4. You were the quiet before the collapse. Now comes the reckoning. Power doesn't knock, it kicks down doors, and yours is no longer waiting in the shadows. They wanted warning signs, flashing lights, thunderous declarations. But the thing about real power, divine, chosen power, is that it moves in silence until it doesn't. You didn't come to announce, you came to arrive. For years, you were overlooked, downplayed, studied like something small and harmless. People got comfortable around you because your presence didn't shout, it observed. And that scared them the least, until they realized too late. You were never the prey. You were the pattern. The glitch in their system, the final piece of a balance the universe is now here to restore. They didn't hear the shift until the ground beneath them cracked. And now you're rising, not slowly, not gently. You're rising like a force that doesn't ask for permission anymore. The softness they clung to, that mask they believed was your truth, it was never weakness. It was your stealth. A gift the universe gave you so you could walk among them undetected while your power built beneath the surface. You moved with precision, you listened, you adapted, and while they used your kindness to sharpen their blades, you were studying them. Every cut, every slight, every betrayal, they became your blueprint. Not for revenge, but for alignment. Now, the illusion is shattered. The version of you they thought they had access to is gone. You've outgrown every room they tried to box you in, and they're rattled. Because the quiet one, the nice one, the one they thought they had figured out, is now the storm ripping through their false sense of control. You didn't need to roar. The shift in your presence said it all. And here's the truth they never saw coming. This was always going to happen. You were chosen not to be hidden forever, but to reveal yourself when the moment was right. You were timed, measured, sent, and the people who thought they had the upper hand are now witnessing their power collapse in real time. Because this is what rising power looks like. It doesn't shout for attention. It walks in, and suddenly everyone has to adjust to the weight it brings. You were always going to outgrow their projections. You were never built to stay small. Your silence was strategic, your softness was calculated, and your presence was never about making others comfortable. It was about waiting for divine alignment. And now, you're in alignment. The universe isn't subtle when it's ready to balance the scales. The people who poured into you, who honored your soul when you were still uncertain, they're about to rise with you. But the ones who used you, mocked you, tried to strip you down and step over your light, they're about to feel what it's like to stand in the path of a power they laughed at. Let them feel it. Let them watch as everything they built on your name crumbles. Because this is balance. This is justice. This is the return. And to you, the chosen who still sometimes doubts, who still wonders if you're really this powerful, really this rare, stop asking. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You wouldn't have survived all that shadow work, isolation, spiritual warfare, and still be standing if the universe didn't handpick you for this moment. They thought they were using you. Truth is, they were part of the plan, pawns in the setup, teachers in disguise. And now their time is up, because now you are the shift. You are the correction. You are the balance they thought would never come. This is your rising power, unapologetic, uncontainable. And the universe, it's watching, not because it's testing you anymore, but because it's backing you. Keep rising. The reckoning has only just begun. Number 5. They saw smoke, but now they're choking on the fire. They laughed when they saw the flicker, but now they're silent as the blaze devours everything they thought was safe. There were signs. Oh, there were signs. You know it. They know it. Moments where the mask slipped, just enough to make the air shift. Times when your energy shifted the entire frequency of a room, and no one could explain why the mood dropped or the silence got too loud. There were days they pushed you too far, and something in your stare made them pause, even if they laughed it off right after. Those weren't outbursts, they were warnings. They saw flashes, but they ignored the quake building underneath. Because back then, it was still manageable, still easy to pretend you were just having a moment, just being too sensitive, just overreacting. They kept playing in your presence, thinking they were in control. But what they didn't realize is that those little tremors, that static in your aura, that was the awakening, the soul of a chosen one beginning to remember what it came here to do. And now it's too late to pretend they didn't see it coming. You've awakened, and the effect is shaking everything built on false foundations. People who once called you nice are now calling you intense. People who once leaned on your light are now retreating from the heat. And good. Let them. Because your awakening isn't here to make them comfortable. It's here to make the truth unavoidable. This was never just a glow-up. This is cosmic retribution in motion. They thought you were always going to be that version of yourself they could manipulate. The one who smiled through insults. The one who kept giving chances. The one who swallowed truth just to keep the peace. But that version of you was only ever temporary. A placeholder while your real self finished loading. Now you're online, fully, and the signal is loud. And yes, some saw it coming, the sensitive ones, the seers, the ones who felt something in your stillness, something ancient. They caught the flicker of wings when the light hit you just right. They saw the fire behind your eyes when you were quiet. They didn't know what they were looking at, but they knew it was not of this world. That was the awakening beginning to leak through the cracks of your containment. And now, there are no more cracks. The whole structure has exploded. You walk different now. You speak different. Your presence hits like thunder on a clear day. And it's not because you're louder, it's because you're aligned. That's what scares them. Because when a chosen one wakes up, the entire lie starts to unravel. The roles get reversed, the masks fall off, and suddenly the ones who thought they were puppeteers realize they were never in control. They were dancing with borrowed time, and time just ran out. They're unsettled, not because you've become someone new, but because they're finally seeing who you've been all along. The version of you that held back. The version that made itself digestible so no one would gag on your greatness. That version was strategy. This one is arrival. And let's not forget, your awakening doesn't just shift you, it shakes them. It throws off the balance they built with your silence as the foundation. Because now that you're standing in full truth, every fake bond, every manipulative connection, every false power dynamic is being exposed for what it is. A game that only worked while you played small. That's over. You're awake now. The universe doesn't wake its warriors just for show. It wakes them when it's time to move, time to clear, time to reclaim. That pressure you felt, that wasn't confusion. That was calling. That was your soul aligning with purpose and the world around you beginning to quake because of it. So let them whisper. Let them avoid your eyes. Let them shift uncomfortably when you enter the room. That's not you being too much. That's just what truth does when it walks in wearing skin they can no longer ignore. You didn't come to take up space. You came to own it. And now the world moves, or it gets moved. Number 6. They danced in the firelight. Now they're learning who set the flame. You warned them with your silence. You tested them with your patience. And now The time for warnings is over. This is the part where the universe cashes the check. It always starts the same. A few feel it early, not in what you say, but in what you carry. They don't need proof. They don't demand explanation. They just know. They stand a little softer in your presence. They speak with care, not fear, but respect. These few, the rare ones, they felt the weight of your energy long before you ever had to show your teeth. And because of that, they'll remain elevated with you, aligned with you, because they didn't need to see the fire to know you could burn. But the rest? Oh, they were warned too. Let's not rewrite history. Let's not pretend you didn't give signs. Subtle ones at first, tiny cracks in your composure, sharp shifts in your tone, fleeting moments when the light in your eyes dimmed just long enough to send a chill through the room. That wasn't moodiness. That was the storm checking its perimeter. But they ignored it, all of it. They prodded, they mocked, they talked over you. They tested the edge of your patience like it was a game, like you were incapable of consequence. They thought the softness was permanent, that your grace was infinite, that your silence meant submission. Fools, every single one of them, because what they mistook for passivity was simply strategy, and what they called weakness was restraint. They never earned the right to witness. You weren't holding back because you couldn't fight. You were holding back because they weren't worth the war. But now the war has come to them. Make no mistake, this is the reckoning. The line has been drawn, the masks have been dropped, and the veil between cause and consequence has burned to ash. The time for quiet warnings is over. The time for cosmic correction is here. And the universe, it's done waiting. Because here's what they never understood. You didn't need to lift a finger. You didn't need revenge. You are the revenge. You are the karma walking, the balance correcting, the truth incarnate in motion. And every move you make from this moment forward will feel like thunder in their lives. Not because you're seeking to destroy, but because the energy they mocked is no longer tolerating their presence. Their blindness was never innocence, it was arrogance. They saw what they wanted to see, and now they'll feel what they never saw coming. It's not personal, it's energetic. You're rising, and everything built on your silence is collapsing. That's how it works. The reckoning isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's you saying no. Sometimes it's you leaving without a word. Sometimes it's you loving yourself out loud, so loudly that it shatters the lies they built about you. And yes, they're shaken, because for the first time, they're seeing the cost of your light. They're realizing that your presence was a gift they misused, that your forgiveness was a luxury they abused, that your energy wasn't free, and now the tab is due. Let them feel it. Let them feel the absence of your support, the vacuum your silence leaves when it's no longer given freely. Let them feel what it's like to exist without your light softening their shadows. That's not cruelty. That's balance. You didn't come here to stay small for the comfort of cowards. You didn't survive everything you've been through just to keep protecting the ones who never protected you. You came to break cycles. You came to turn pain into power. You came to reclaim everything they tried to make you forget. This moment, the shift, the rift, the rise, isn't just a phase. It's a full circle moment. The reckoning they never believed would arrive. The storm that came wearing your face. So hold your head high. Walk through the ashes with grace. And remember, you warned them. And now, the universe is answering on your behalf. Number 7. You were the echo. Now you're the voice that splits the sky. They mistook the silence of the divine as absence, but silence was the build-up. Now comes the emergence, and nothing will be the same. Every time they interrupted you mid-thought, every time they side-eyed your ideas, took credit for your work, or laughed behind your back while smiling in your face, the universe watched, and it didn't forget. You didn't need to keep score. The energy kept its own receipts. You see, chosen ones don't need to chase justice. They are justice waiting for the right moment to step forward. The system may look like it's delayed, but it's just setting the stage. And now the curtain is rising. They misunderstood you. That's where their downfall began. They thought your softness was submission, that your patience meant powerlessness, that your stillness meant you had nothing to say. But while they were writing you off, the divine was writing you in bold letters, with cosmic ink, into a story they will no longer be able to ignore. Because now, your emergence has begun, and it isn't gentle. You didn't come back to the surface as the same version of yourself that went into the silence. You've returned carrying weight, wisdom, and a roar. Not a scream for attention, but a frequency that breaks illusions. A vibration that unsettles every structure built on false power. This is what divine emergence feels like. You open your mouth and the air changes. You walk into a room and it tilts. You're not trying to be powerful, you are. And the ones who used to dominate conversations with shallow noise suddenly can't find their voices when you speak. They don't know what to call this version of you. They don't have words for someone who carries divine authority without asking for permission. They're used to loud egos, not quiet forces of truth. They're used to people pretending, not embodying. That's why you disturb them now. You no longer speak in palatable tones. You no longer dim your light so they can shine. You no longer explain the thunder in your voice. Because this voice, it doesn't just speak, it commands. It moves energies. It reshapes narratives. It restores balance. It is the voice of someone chosen by the universe, not to be liked, but to lead. And make no mistake, this emergence isn't about revenge. You didn't rise just to prove them wrong. You rose because the time came for truth to take up space. The universe decided it was time for your silence to expire, your softness to harden, your wings to unfold. And now they're facing what they mocked, a presence they can't minimize, a truth they can't gaslight, a light they can't dim. Let them feel it. Let them remember every time they underestimated you. Let them witness what happens when the divine says now. Because the misunderstanding they clung to, like a shield, is over. The game is up. The wool they thought was over your eyes, gone. And now that you see with divine clarity, they can no longer hide in plain sight. They're exposed, not by vengeance, but by vibration. And here's the thing, they thought they were dealing with a person. But you're not just a person, you're a vessel. You are a movement-wearing skin, your purpose shaped into human form. You don't just walk, you carry waves behind every step. You don't just speak, you release sound that shifts fates. That's why they're nervous now. Not because you're angry, but because you're certain. This certainty doesn't come from ego. It comes from the divine. It comes from having survived everything that was meant to break you and still emerging with fire in your eyes and peace in your voice. It comes from walking through the dark and not just finding light, but realizing you were the light all along. So now, speak. Move how you were always meant to. Don't wait for applause. Don't soften the truth. Don't shrink your voice to soothe their fragility. Because when the divine emerges through you, the world doesn't get to look away. They will see, they will feel it, and they will remember this moment. The moment, the one they thought was safe, silent, and sweet, became the storm that couldn't be silenced. You were never hidden. You were held. Now you're here, and they're not ready. Number 8. They asked for the truth. Now they're choking on the brightness. You didn't need revenge. You just needed to remember who you are. And now that you have, the atmosphere itself is shifting. Now they know. Not because you shouted, not because you made some grand speech or called them out publicly. They know because the energy around you has changed permanently. They know because the air got thick when you walked in. Because your silence started carrying weight. Because your presence began commanding more than attention. It started demanding truth. Oh, the silence that followed, that heavy kind. Not the awkward pause, not the "we don't know what to say" kind of silence. No, this is something else entirely. This is the silence of reckoning. The moment after lightning and before the thunder. That split second where everyone realizes the old version of you is gone, and what stands in their place is not here to play. Some of them stepped back without even thinking, didn't they? A subconscious recoil, like their body knew before their mind caught up. This is not who you used to be. This is not the version they played with, poked at, doubted, dismissed. That version is ashes now. What remains is fire, focused, controlled, and completely unwilling to be dimmed again. Let them feel that heat, because it's not personal, it's spiritual. It's the natural order reasserting itself. The shift has begun. The scales are tilting. Everything they built on the foundation of your silence is starting to tremble. Not because you tore it down, but because it was never meant to stand without your permission. They thought they could exist in your light while disrespecting the source. But now that the full version of you has emerged, they're realizing something sobering. Not everyone survives proximity to power. And that's what you are now, power. Not just influence, not just presence, radiation, divine frequency unfiltered. And that type of energy, it reveals everything. It makes people uncomfortable, not because you're cruel, but because you've stopped cushioning your truth for their convenience. They used to think they had you figured out, but the shift has exposed the lie they were living in. Now they're reeling, watching everything they thought was solid begin to collapse under the weight of your becoming. Study their faces. Remember this moment. The widened eyes, the stuttering words, the fake smiles trying to hold up masks that don't fit anymore. Some will try to pretend they never doubted you, that they always believed. Let them. That's not your concern anymore. Your concern is alignment, purpose, walking in the path that was always yours, but now with no filter and no brakes. You didn't rise to make them comfortable. You rose because it was time. Time for the silence to end. Time for the light to break through. time for the real ones to rise and the false ones to be revealed. And here's what they're realizing. Too late. They were never just dealing with a person. They were dealing with a divine assignment. They thought they could play games with someone the universe sent, that they could dismiss someone built in fire and sculpted by shadow. But now the game is over. You are no longer accessible the way you were. Your energy has become sacred ground, and only those with clean hands and clear hearts can stand next to you without being singed by the truth. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment. The shift is not just happening around you. It's happening because of you. And whether they understand it or not, they feel it. The shift in your posture, the shift in your eyes, the shift in your boundaries, in your tone, in your energy. You're not explaining anymore. You're not asking. You're simply being. And the universe is moving with you. Let them feel the burn, if that's what it takes. Let them sit in the discomfort of no longer being able to gaslight your power into submission. This is what happens when divine energy is no longer willing to be packaged, polished, and made palatable. You are the shift. And now that it's begun, nothing can stop it. Number 9. Now they stand when you enter, but it's too late to earn your throne. They didn't respect the seed. Now they're panicking at the bloom. Watch them scramble. The ones who mocked, doubted, and overlooked you are suddenly rewiring their tone, fumbling respect, calling it support, as if you've forgotten the tone they used when they thought you were harmless. There's panic behind the praise now. That tight smile, that overly polite hesitation, like they're standing too close to something they finally realize can scorch. Don't be flattered. Be clear. This isn't real admiration. It's fear dressed up as recognition. And it came too late. But not everyone is shook. Look closely and you'll see them, those quiet ones who always held a steady gaze when you spoke, who nodded not out of politeness but understanding. They never needed proof of your power. They felt it before it had a name. These are your people, the ones who saw the blueprint before the structure rose, the ones who didn't flinch at your silence because they were listening to the frequency beneath it. They don't need the announcement. They've been waiting for the era of your emergence like a prophecy unfolding. And now that it's here, everything is shifting. No more diluting your message. No more softening your presence so others feel safe. That part of the journey is over. What you carry isn't meant to sit quietly in the corner. It's meant to burn off the dead weight. It's meant to transform rooms, minds, systems, lives. You are not here to be liked. You're here to disrupt. Let them recalibrate, or not. Let them twist themselves trying to keep up with the new frequency. Your concern is no longer their comfort. It's alignment, purpose, truth. The mask is off. The fire is lit. This is the era of power. And now they know. And so, here we are. The veil has lifted, the storm has risen, and your emergence is no longer up for debate. You've stepped into the era where your power no longer hides. It commands, it transforms, it shakes foundations. Let them adjust or get left behind. This isn't about proving anything. It's about becoming everything you were always meant to be. If this message lit something in your soul, don't let it stop here. Like, subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments to show you're locked in. Share this with another chosen one. It's time we all rise together.